Everybody, it's Carol Marak at carolmarak.com. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Solo and Smart. And I have a wonderful person that I'm interviewing today, and this is Kathy Kress. And Kathy, I've known Kathy since, I'm going to say early, probably since 2010 at least. And it's so wonderful. This is the first time that I am seeing Kathy's face. So this is great. And Kathy holds a MSW in Planning, Administration, and Organization in Aging from UC Berkeley. And her book, she has lots of books. Her book, Handbook of Geriatric Care Management, 4th edition, 2015, Jones and Bartlett, is the Bible of geriatric care management. And her book, Care Managers Working with the Aging Family, which is another book by Jones and Bartlett, is only major book care management that has clinical tools for the aging family. And Kress published also My Geriatric Care Management Operations Manual, which is available at her website, kathykress.com. And Ms. Kress is the founder of GCM Consult LLC, working with small and national groups who want to add or launch geriatric care management type businesses. And she has taught geriatric care management at the University of Florida, San Francisco State University, and UC Berkeley. And she is a partner in Lifespan Ventures, a national care management startup. So to say the least, Kathy is well known in the geriatric care management sector. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you know, geriatric care managers are very near and dear to my heart because when I was a family caregiver for both my parents, we had hired a care manager to help with my dad, who was living with Alzheimer's. And I just love the work that you folks do. And if it had not been for that care manager, I would hate to think what would have happened to my dad. So I have a very soft feeling for folks like you. Thank you for the work you do. So speaking of care managers, I know I'm a solo ager now, and I would like to talk about the work that care managers, geriatric care managers can do, especially for people like me who are aging at home alone without any nearby help or support. And really anyone watching out for us. A lot of us don't have anyone to watch out for us. So what concerns, in your opinion, should we start thinking about and looking out for while we're still able to think clearly and still in good health?
Well, thank you. I think the main problem with a solo person who's a solo aging person is, you have no circle of care. That's the easiest way to say this, that there's not a support mechanism for you. And, one of the things a care manager does is they'll do a psychosocial assessment, which is, the legal support you have and, any kind of mental illness history, housing, what's your housing situation like? And, if you're solo, you don't normally gather that about yourself. You don't
Mhm.
gather those records. And what you want to do is do this preemptively. You want to do it ahead of time. And the other important part of what care managers do is they figure out what your joy is, and that's called quality of care. It's different than the two things I talked about, because not only do you need to protect yourself physically and mentally as you age, but you have to have happiness, you have to have joy. And so care managers can give you all of that. So what I would say, we don't have very much time, is that you really want to be a preemptive planner. You want to understand that you want someone helping you, and as you age, and basically figure out a legal mechanism. And you can do that in a will, but you certainly want to put it into a trust. It's a little safer. I'm not a lawyer. That you would like a care manager or someone that you want to designate who will help you with your care. And we'll get into conservatorships later, but I don't recommend I don't recommend that. But you plan ahead. I have one friend, it's not a client, who literally she had two homes, and she realized as she aged, she needed to be near a child, and she shopped around for an alternative for 2 years before she chose one, and then literally moved into it while she was still, independent. She was still
Mhm.
traveling.
Mhm.
But she had made the choice herself, and that's what everyone wants to do, is make these choices and not have someone who might have nefarious ideas or the wrong ideas make those choices for you. So that's what I recommend.
Yeah, especially you don't want a stranger making those decisions for
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. You don't, yeah, I'll talk about that a little later, but you certainly don't want undue influence.
So I'm curious because I've had this conversation before in terms of care managers maybe playing a role in some of our legal matters,
Mhm.
like being our healthcare proxy, or not necessarily our financial proxy, but potentially. But however, what about a geriatric care manager serving in that role?
Um, I think that's fine if, I think the first thing that you really want to do, we were just talking about this. I think you probably you shouldn't have your family in any of those roles. And the reason is you want someone who's objective, who doesn't bring their emotional baggage or remembrance or anger. If you were a bad parent, you don't want your kid
Right.
to make those decisions about you. And so I think the best thing to do is to get an objective party, and a geriatric care manager, and that's what I was talking about in the first question, can certainly go in there, in the legal documents. But geriatric care managers aren't attorneys. However, they have to, basically they're what you call mandated reporters, just like a bank. Like if somebody comes in, tries to take money out of your bank and you're an old woman, that immediately the bank has to call the county, whatever the county legal department is, it can't,
Mhm.
APS or something.
Mhm.
But what care managers do is they assess your legal supports. I talked about that first. It's part of a psychosocial assessment. Like, do you have a conservatorship? Do you have all these papers we're just talking about, legal documents? And then your fiscal, and then your physical, because you want to know, is there fiscal or physical abuse? And that's really common. So that way they're going to discover it. They look into sweetheart scams, which I'm sure somebody's talked about. That's when usually a caregiver. I had a client once who was 89 and in a wheelchair, and his care provider took him to Reno and married him in the wheelchair. That's a sweetheart scam. Or undue influence. I was just talking about that. That's when somebody makes such a great friend that you trust them, and really they're just, trying to take your money, steal your jewelry, and that's very common. So, we do function legally, and you can appoint a geriatric care manager to any of these things, but it has to be the right person
Mhm.
that really
Mhm.
that you trust and meets your needs, and maybe you have your lawyer look into as well.
So that brings me to a question that I didn't prepare you for. However, I'm going to
That's
ask
okay.
you
You can go
anyway.
for it.
How would a person like me assess a how would I assess whether or not a care manager or which care manager would best fit for my needs?
Well, first of all, you have to know that they're certified. They're not licensed. They don't have a
Uh,
license like a licensed social worker in any state right now. Eventually they may, but then you would look into that. But you want to know that they're certified. And with ALCA, the Geriatric Care Management
mhm.
certification body, they check out all your credentials. You have to take an exam, and that's one way to look into it. Um, and then, if indeed in the future, and it may be that they're licensed, you would certainly, it's just like a doctor. I mean, you would want the doctor to actually have a physician's degree, and you would want to look at the school they went to. You don't want them going to some place at the end of the earth because they couldn't get a degree here.
Right.
That's just common sense. But then, there's also just chemistry. Do you know this person and trust them? You really have to talk to them. And that's another thing that solo aging people should do before start interviewing care managers when they've got their ability to really choose. And who do you really like? Who do you trust?
Mhm.
And are they certified? And I would say they're the two ways to do it.
Okay, okay. That makes total sense. Now, going back to selecting like a fiduciary or a conservator for your legal matters, do we've all heard the horror story of Britney Spears, and we certainly don't have to delve into that. But so, what are your thoughts about selecting or having a conservator to oversee your legal issue, legal matters?
Well, first of all, conservatorship is the last thing that really should be done legally. And that's why Britney Spears case kind of blows me away, because California really is strict about this. It's the last thing you want to do. A, it's taking people's rights away. And B, it's incredibly expensive, because in California, the conservatee, the person who they're trying to take the rights, they have to have an attorney. The person who wants to take their rights away, they have an attorney. The attorneys make a lot of money, and so it's very, very expensive, and it takes your rights away. There are many more ways to do this, and I'm just going to go through what the state of Massachusetts suggests. And one alternative would be to set up a trust. And I talked about that earlier, and appoint someone in the trust, not your family, but someone who's objective. And, it could be like people have relationships with accountants all their life, and tell them, besides sex, the hardest thing to ever talk about is money. And so they know everything about you, and you have a relationship with them. I'm not saying all accountants are great, but someone that you really have, is in a trusting relationship, who's not related to you, who can't be objective. You can have joint bank accounts instead of a conservatorship, because someone else can manage the account, and then not have the older person, be, have sweetheart scams, or having money taken out
Mhm.
because they were buying. I mean, I'm not even making the things that happens. Whole
Mhm.
jewelry collections gone. So, basically a joint account can help, or a rep payee. And a rep payee is someone who will pay your bills. You don't have access to money, but they will pay your bills and give you an allotment of money for the month. Now, this is all essentially fiscal. The trust isn't, but the joint bank accounts and the rep payee have to do with money. That isn't going to be overlooking your physical, because conservatorship is on one hand, it's conservatorship of person. Are you running around nude? I mean, I'm not, I'm just saying this to give great ideas, but people who really don't have control of their life can do these outrageous things. Are you taking care of your person, taking baths, et cetera, et cetera? And then there's a conservatorship of a state. And are you giving money away to someone who's 21, who's going to take you to Reno and marry you in a wheelchair?
Right, right.
So what's left out of that is the person with the joint bank account and rep payee. And I think that can be a care manager, a reputable care manager. And again, you'd want to look in ALCA for a geriatric care manager. That's the certification body. And see, and the bigger one, the bigger case management society of America is really, it's not geriatric. It's, more, it's more insurance, care management.
Yeah, the ALCA, is that ALCA.org?
I know, yeah, it's the Aging Life Care Association.
Okay, life care management.
It
Yes,
used
I
to be
know that.
National Association of Geriatric Care Managers, and they changed it, unfortunately, I think, really, because, the brand sort of went away. But they're the certification body of aging life is NACM. And they can just Google it, NACM,
Yeah.
NACCUM, and
Okay.
they'll go through everybody that's certified.
Okay. Very good. Okay. Well, I appreciate that. Is there one book you might recommend for anyone to read?
Um, well, if somebody wanted to be a geriatric care manager, I would say, that you'd probably read my book, the Handbook of Geriatric Care Management. But if it's a person who is really trying to figure all this out, um, hold on, let me get this book. Uh, there's a couple of books. Sorry, because I teach, I have a lot of stuff. Um, I think that there's a book called, there's this guy named Terry Hargrave, Hargrave. I don't know whether he's still alive, but he's a great writer in aging. And he has this great book called Finishing Well that covers, a whole lot of these issues.
Okay.
And it's about the family, because really in the end, aging isn't about an older person, it's about the whole family. And you have to change the family for a little bit to get care for them. And then there's another book. Fred Luskin he teaches at Stanford. Hargrave, I think, is the University of Pittsburgh, and he wrote this book called Forgive for Good. That's a really good book, because in the end, as you age, you want to start forgiveness with people that you've cut off, and we've cut off so many people. So you really want to look at that. I don't think there's really a great book about a soul. In fact, you should write it about
Well, I
soul.
am.
Well, okay, then you're my answer. There's so little done on the individual, isolated, really, you're isolated elder,
Mhm.
and what should happen. And I don't know of any book that really covers it. It might be covered in overall texts, but that's not user friendly. When I wrote my book, I hated all the texts I ever had in graduate school. They were so boring. And I decided if I was going to write a book, I was going to write a readable book. And I think that's what everybody wants. So I'm sure you'll write that. What's user friendly for the family and the older person. And so your book would be perfect. I
Well, we hope. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to end our conversation because one time you told me this lovely story of a client of yours who was at the time a solo ager, and he was at his end of life. And he wanted to die at home, as I understand.
He did.
However, he didn't have family or anyone a lot of friends, I should say, to really care for him while he, you know, was on hospice, I guess. But I'll let you tell the story.
Well, thank you. I love this story, and it always kind of makes me cry. When I had a geriatric care management agency in Silicon Valley, we got a client who was in a nursing home, and he had a terminal diagnosis. Hospice was brought in. However, he had no family whatsoever. And so when I was talking earlier about quality of life, what would give joy. I needed that, or I had, a big agency at the time. We needed that, but we needed, because we had hospice, they would have been there to be with him and care for him. But he had no family, and that's the quality of life you need when you die. That's why I was talking about forgiveness. Forgiveness needs
Mhm.
to happen at the end. And so, I thought, well, how can I find this? And I looked into his history, and he had been the head of a group in Santa Clara County, San Jose, that had built a trail up the Santa Cruz Mountains, where I live on the other side, up to the reservoir, we call it. And it was a trail all the way up the mountain. And I think it had taken them 10 years. And it was all these people from Los Gatos and San Jose who had worked together, and he was the head of it. And so I called them and I said, I explained that he was dying. He was going to go home. We had hospice, we had our agency, but would they consider visiting him? And this is the part that always gets me. There were 300 of them that volunteered. I mean, I've never exaggerated this. 300 people. And it usually death doesn't, it sometimes can happen really fast, but usually it's a long progression because they take you off liquids, etc. And
Yeah.
he took them 3 weeks to die, but they took shifts. And every one of those 300 people volunteered for shifts over that 3 weeks. And they sat with him and they showed him, they had all sorts of photographs of building the trail and memories that they could share together. And they were his family.
Wow.
And he died with them. He died in their hands. And that's what I really want for solo practitioners, for solo agers too. I think if we don't have a lot of time, but join groups. Join groups, be part of something like this. And you don't have to be the head of building a trail up a mountain, but you could quilt or something like that. And those people come through for you at the end. I'm not a religious person, but churches can be used in the same way. I mean,
Yes.
the environment was his spiritual, place. So I would say that, that joining a group and then, put them in your will to do this. They do it because they love you. And that's my story.
I just love that story. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you. And thank you for all the good information for my listeners, because we definitely have to deal with these concerns. We have to start thinking about them and planning for them, and starting and to get prepared if one day we're in a situation where we're left all alone and there's no one to watch out for
Exactly.
us. Right.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
well, thank you again. And to you listeners, this is Kathy Kress. I'll have more of her information down below. And thank you again.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.